from an ROI perspective, what we've done with our hospitals is most of them won't even do annual inventory counts in their OR Supply Corps IR EP labs. That's where we sit. That's where you're going to find a SxanPro product. Because they're doing an inventory on a quarterly or sometimes only a semi-annual basis of those specific spaces. And they have dashboards in our cloud system that shows what product's going to expire when. So now they can say, all right, well, if this product's going to expire in 6 months, I can reach out to my manufacturer rep and maybe get a trade-in. Maybe they can swap it out.
Without supplies, there's no surgery. Without products, there's no patient care. Welcome to Power Supply, the healthcare supply chain podcast focused on helping you navigate the intricacies of logistics, purchasing, contracting, and supplier relationships. Each episode, we speak with healthcare executives, supply chain leaders, and innovative entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the loading dock to strategic sourcing, from buyers to the C-suite, and across the enterprise, we tackle the real-life issues impacting the healthcare supply chain. Whether you're tuning in for conversation or inspiration, we're glad you're here. You're just in time to hear it from the source and stock up on insight. So sit back and plug into Power Supply.
On this vendor spotlight, we are speaking with Ashlea Souffrou, founder and CEO of SxanPro. And honestly, if you've been at all involved with Power Supply and following us on LinkedIn and listening to the podcast, Ashlea should not be new to you. She's done a great job with the UDI Expert Series on Power Supply. She's been a past guest on the podcast, and she's incredibly involved on social media. One thing that we haven't done before is we haven't really talked to Ashlea about how she founded SxanPro and what it's like being a woman entrepreneur. And so we're going to start there, but we're going to talk a lot about the benefits of SxanPro and specifically the JUDI app, which is going to help you gain visibility to an accurate inventory in the most timely manner possible. Stay with us. We're going to be right back.
A production of 17 Studios, you're listening to Power Supply.
I'm speaking with Ashlea Souffrou, founder and CEO of SxanPro, and also, if you have not been paying attention on Power Supply, I'd be surprised. She's our UDI expert in our expert series. I think you're very familiar to our audience, Ashlea, and you're doing some really great work out there. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You know, we've had you on a prior podcast, and obviously you're sharing your insights with our audience every single month on the expert series. But one thing that we haven't really talked about is SxanPro and your vision for it, your background. And I'd like to take a little bit of time to just introduce you to the audience. And maybe you can talk about how did SxanPro come about and a little bit about how your background tied into the formation of the organization.
Yeah, I have always worked in hospitals throughout my career. So I started with Stryker right out of college. And I was in a hospital on day 2 and then transitioned into their sustainability division when they acquired a company in 2009. And that's when I really found my passion for helping hospitals recover dollars, reduce waste, find, sustainable solutions. And so I decided to really go after and make a career out of, that sector in a way to help support our hospitals nationwide. So my passion is definitely in that space. I ended up starting a distributorship, which I just helped support other small businesses that were looking to grow their hospital network. And everything we offered was based around, that cost savings. So one of the things we started doing was helping hospitals buy and sell unused supplies and equipment. And through that, I got into hospital closures, which hopefully not everyone in the audience is familiar with hospital closures, but it requires a lot of manpower to audit what a hospital has on their shelves, whether that's equipment or supplies. And so it would take us weeks to do that work, to be able to give visibility into the seller and to the buyer of what they were acquiring, because we had to manually write down reference numbers, lot numbers, expiration dates, manufacturers. And I started paying attention to barcodes. And it also happened to coincide right at the time of UDI. And so it was around 2017. And that's when class 3 devices were getting the UDI barcode. And so I just started educating myself. I sat on FDA conference calls, GS1 conference calls, read all of the articles from some of my favorite, advocates for UDI, like Karen Conway, and just started to pay attention and thought, all right, well, if this data is out there, how can we use it for our team? How can we use it for our hospitals to speed up this process? So we created a really small beta app. I have a friend that makes them. And I was like, I think if I aggregate all of this data and we put all these things here, I think it'll work. And I just took a chance. And so it did work. And then we started using it in our hospitals as part of our services. And our hospital partners were like, what the heck is this? You can give me visibility into expiration dates and lot numbers, and you could help me with, solving all of these problems. And so we decided to, when I say we, when I say we, it was my husband and I decided to invest, money into commercializing, this into a business in the beginning of 2020. And so, yeah.
So, I've been seeing all kinds of awards for SxanPro. I mean, your team does a great job of staying active on social media. If anybody goes and finds you on LinkedIn, they're going to learn a lot about the great work that you're doing. How does some of these, awards come about? And specifically, you talked about helping small businesses. So you're obviously a small business yourself, because this was a startup project and an idea and a vision that you put into place. But I imagine that you have a real special place in your heart for small businesses.
I am really passionate about small business. I come from a long line of small business owners. My husband is one. My parents were one. My grandparents have all run small businesses. But the success of SxanPro has really been with our strategic partners and with other business owners that have been like-minded in the last 4 to 5 years that have said, hey, we need to get in and really roll up our sleeves and help our supply chain leaders and be innovative. So a lot of things that you'll see us talk about are partnerships, some of which are other power supply writers. We work with Notisphere on recalls. We love to work with Sergio on the instrument side. And so we're trying to do a lot of work by partnering together with them to bring in holistic solutions to our supply chain leaders, and together kind of rolling up our sleeves and saying, what problems are you solving right now and how can we help?
Yeah, I think getting that interconnectedness, and we've talked about it a lot on Power Supplies, and it's that interoperability. Another one of the experts on the expert series, Vin Matozo, talks about that, but really making sure that all these different solutions remove the human effort to take data from one and bring it into another. And I think that's a really key part of what you're doing at SxanPro, because you're getting this data that, isn't even really in any one system, because getting an accurate reflection of the inventory that you're working with. And that's really born out of your experience, right? When those hospitals would close, the size of that inventory had to be ridiculous. And so you're looking at, boy, it would have been really nice if I had a tool like that. Oh, wait, that doesn't just apply in hospital closures. That applies in the day-to-day, kind of realm. And so how did this all evolve organically for you from that? Obviously it was your experience, but then to develop the solution and to have it have application in all these different areas outside of maybe what your original vision was for the functionality.
I've been really fortunate to have an awesome network of supply chain leaders that have been willing to brainstorm with me, have been willing to let me try things. And that's not just me taking, right? I've also sat down with these supply chain leaders and they've said, we don't have visibility into our consignment. And now we're having issues with expired or recalled products because we don't have reps effectively managing it. I think your tool could help us with that. And that's where our team will sit down with our hospitals and put together a program. The technology is the same, right? It's a mobile app. There's no IT integration. The tool itself is the same. You can download an app and we can walk into a hospital and we can start scanning. And it's funny because that's the thing that people still just can't get their heads around. That's part of the process, right? We have to show them how easy it is. But because the supply chain leaders are wanting to solve a unique problem and looking to have that visibility, they have equally helped me just as much as, I've helped them to figure out the applications for this business.
All right. So before we dive into that, I also want to just give you a nice congratulations, because this is hot off the presses, so to speak, that you recently became a certified women-owned business. And that was not a very quick process, that takes a good amount of time. Can you talk about going through that?
Absolutely. Obviously, we've always been a woman-owned business, right? And so we always say that I founded the company and started it at my dining room table. But we wanted to put in the effort to be able to get the certification from the government to help our hospital partners. So it took us about 18 months. A lot of that has to do with COVID delays, but there's a lot of work that goes into getting that certification. And I'm really proud of our team for rolling up their sleeves to be able to do that, because it's important. It's important that we're supporting, diverse businesses that are coming up with innovative solutions.
Well, that's really what we're looking to do, I think, in supply chain, is really transform the industry, because now there's a light that's been shown on healthcare supply chain. I think the resources are hopefully starting to come, but they're necessary to take the next step. We've got workforce shortages that are being addressed with remote workers. I mean, there are people that are working across the country in supply chain organizations, from the East Coast to the West Coast, because they've got a need that they need to fill on their team. And we did find that supply chain can run quite effectively in a remote setting. And that's changed a lot. But one of the things that's done is it's removed people from having real visibility and physical access to the inventory. And I know a common theme, not only between you and I, but you mentioned a number of the expert writers and other podcast guests that you work collaboratively with, but it's about getting the right data. And then the transformation piece is making that data usable in new ways and more efficient ways. And so what are you kind of seeing as additional trends that really relate to gaining this visibility to accurate inventory?
So specific to what we do, which is probably the only way that I can answer that question, is users of our technology can scan an entire OR supply core in 8 hours and with 1 or 2 people. But now if I'm a VP of supply chain, and this is where we're seeing those VPs, they may support hospitals in 4 different states. From the supplies perspective, the way that outdates have been managed, or outdates of managing to make sure they're pulled from the shelves, as well as outdates and trying to transfer, sell, donate those items before they go expired, has been, it's managed by the supply core. And usually it's done with like pen and paper, if it's being managed at all. So for us, and what makes our technology important for this transformation and work, is that a VP of supply chain can now see exactly what's on the shelf from any computer in any state across the country and the world. I mean, as long as they have Wi-Fi. So having that information helps them be proactive, right? They could start running reports and say, all right, well, we're doing a large conversion. Where are all these products sitting? I now know I need to call these 3 leaders and these 3 hospitals to go and pull these specific products, because we know exactly where they are. Historically, they've never been able to do that. And a lot of, in most hospitals today, if you tell somebody to go find something, they have to run around a supply core and be like, well, where is that box of suture? Because we store it in 8 places and I don't even know where that tree is. So that's been really impactful for some of our current customers.
Yeah. And sometimes the inventory isn't stored centralized, right? It can be in all kinds of different areas of the hospital, which can also create quite a bit of a challenge. And you're talking about that paper effort to collate that information. And then as healthcare organizations get bigger and bigger, collating that information, by the time it all comes together, the information itself might be outdated, never mind the product, right? And so it's really having access to that information quickly. And I literally was just talking to somebody that is going to be doing some content and coming on the Power Supply show, and they were bogged down doing annual inventory the last 2 weeks. I mean, it just completely took over their day-to-day life. You're talking about doing a core in 8 hours. So can you talk about the real time and just how much more efficient that annual inventory can be?
The thing that I think is so funny about annual inventories is that hospitals are spending resources that they don't have just to shore up their inventory, right? So they're just counting 1, 2, 3, 4. They write it on a piece of paper, and then that paper, like you had just indicated, has to go and be collated or has to be typed into a computer software. So what we're trying to challenge the industry is saying, why is that acceptable? If you're going to put people in the role of counting, shouldn't you be getting more data? Shouldn't you have visibility into expiration dates? Shouldn't you know where your lot numbers are? Shouldn't you be able to predict what's going to expire and be able to maybe recover dollars instead of just counting? So from an ROI perspective, what we've done with our hospitals is most of them won't even do annual inventory counts in their OR Supply Core IR EP labs. That's where we sit. That's where you're going to find a SxanPro product. Because they're doing an inventory on a quarterly or sometimes only a semi-annual basis of those specific spaces. And they have dashboards in our cloud system that shows what product's going to expire when. So now they can say, all right, well, if this product's going to expire in 6 months, I can reach out to my manufacturer rep and maybe get a trade-in. Maybe they can swap it out because sometimes they still have to reorder that product. So by having that visibility, you're able to be more proactive. By replacing the workflow of saying, let's just inventory the procedure areas where probably 80% of the value of the supplies are sitting are in those 3 departments, which is the expensive stuff, right? Those are the $2,000 catheters or the $10,000 implants. By focusing on just those spaces and really shoring up that inventory, it also is providing that cost savings, but also reducing the need for 4 people spending hours at a time with a pen and paper, just going 1, 2, 3, 4. And unfortunately, a lot of those people are nurses, and we don't have enough nurses right now to be spending on counting supplies.
That's a super important point. I mean, the workforce shortage is hitting in so many different ways. We just had a whole conversation about why supply chain should get involved in that contracted labor arena, because as experts, they can come into that and offer up a lot of contracting support, et cetera. But to your point, having nurses who are clinicians, when there's a shortage, doing things that are really remedial can also be frustrating for the clinician in terms of job satisfaction. So it's not just are we putting somebody to work on a task that we're paying them probably more than we should for that task, but then at the same time, it's also about how satisfied are they with their job when they do that. And that's not limited to clinicians. That's on the supply chain side too. You know, just doing that counting is tedious, and it doesn't really give people a lot of intrinsic reward about what value they're bringing to the organization. I like what you're saying too, though. It's more than just counting. There's data that's accessible to us that's sitting right there. We're just not capturing it because it's such a huge effort to just count. And so, yeah, there's an operational efficiency. There's definitely reduced spend, you know, because you can recapture products before they're expired. But there's really just that employee retention, because every time you hire a new employee, it's costing you $50,000 to $100,000, depending on their role, just to bring them up to speed.
Absolutely. So what's interesting too, when we're talking about, you know, workflows, so many hospitals manage their outdates in so many different ways, right? We see them with stickers. We see them with like stickies, highlighters. There's no consistency, but with the turnover that we're seeing, that likely means that the products that are the person that might be in charge of looking for outdates, they may be missing it. They may not have that person in that role right then and there. So you're increasing the chances of never events. The fact that I love to share with people is only 3% of your inventory actually expires on average on a monthly basis. So you're allowing one FTE to look at 97% of the inventory that isn't even necessary to be looking at. So one thing I think I missed on your last question, which is on the ROI side of this, if you're adopting a scanning of the supplies, which is, like I said, it's about 8 hours, 2 people in your supply core. Now, each month, all they're going to look for is maybe 15 devices. They get the report, they go find those 15 items, they pull them from the shelf. Here's a checks and balances too, right? When JCO shows up on the door, they're checking for outdates. And there's areas in the hospital that are high risk. Suture trees are one of them. Cath labs, another big area. And so being able to have that visibility, and also it's that checks and balance. One other thing I like, I'll plug, because I love talking about Notisphere, is our partners. This is one of those, connectivities of how we've reached across the aisle and said, hey, here's another small business that's solving a really great problem. All of our customers' data is checked to make sure that there isn't a recalled product on the shelf. So because Notisphere has all this historical data, we've partnered with them. So now from a checks and balances perspective, in that count where you're shoring up your inventory, which is the main reason you're doing it, now you're ensuring that you don't have an expired product or recalled products on your shelf, which is preventing those never events.
You talked about the auditors and the surveyors that are coming in. One thing I know about making those surveys and audits go well is showing them that you're confident and that your process is sound. And so if they come in and they see that you've got an industry leading best practice in place for managing those expiring products, if they don't see a hole in what you're doing, they're not going to keep digging. And they're going to move on to the next thing. And I think that's a really important point to make too, because a lot of times when you're in that survey window, the anxiety of everyone in the organization just goes way up, because they're like, what if they find something? And then what does that mean? And then all of the corrective action work. And while that can be a positive impact ultimately on the healthcare organization, it's pretty stressful. And to know that you have something in place that's rock solid and sound, and that you can show them the data that says and supports that you're on top of it, it can really have them just move on to the next thing and help with a successful survey. I thought that was a really important point. I hadn't even thought of that before.
Yeah, we actually just experienced it recently where a hospital got dinged for having expired product. So they called us in the crisis scenario of, we have to show JCO how we've solved this. So I'll continuously say that SxanPro is so easy to use, right? It's a mobile app. You can literally just go in and start scanning. We don't need any hospital information. We scan right off of UDI. And if anybody doesn't know what UDI is by now, please call me, because I want to make sure everybody understands it's not just the UPC code, right? You're getting the lot numbers, you're getting the expiration dates, you're getting clean descriptions. But in that crisis scenario, they were able to do a complete inventory of all their procedure areas with like 3 people in a day and a half. They were able to send a complete report to JCO and submit that to say, here's all of our expiration dates. We've ensured we did find some additional expired products. We pulled them out. Here's our new plan moving forward with expired product. And they were able to call us within 24 hours and get that response done within 4 days.
Imagine what that would have been like as a manual effort. That's insane.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So we keep talking about the app, but we haven't actually told everybody about the apps. You're talking about how easy they are to use, but really we want to talk about JUDI today. And so why don't you introduce JUDI to everyone? I feel like JUDI has a personality. And I love the way that, you kind of made it memorable in your marketing. But what does JUDI stand for, and what does JUDI do?
Yeah, so JUDI is our mobile app, and it stands for Just the Unique Device Identifier. So we tried to make it personal. This is a tool that sits in supply cores. So it's funny, we wanted to make it personal because our supply chain techs that were using it were like, oh, let's just go get JUDI. JUDI can probably tell us what this is. And so we have built a persona around JUDI as one of our products, and we'll continue to do that. We have a JUDI section, or we talk about JUDI solves, JUDI teaches, JUDI scans, and what data you're collecting. So JUDI is one of our products under the SxanPro portfolio, specific to the UDI, specific to supplies. And the mobile app scans the UDI. So in that barcode right off of the manufacturer packaging. And then there's the cloud portion. And so what we find is we have users, right? We have the people who are scanning, and then we have our directors, managers, VP of supply chain who have visibility into all of this inventory on the cloud. And we have multi-tier levels. So it could be an entire hospital system with 10 different hospitals with 4 different units. And you can drill down and see the different reports based on what inventory is sitting where.
That's phenomenal. And there's something else that was really important that you said, which also ties into how you were able to get it up and running and solve this survey issue in 4 days. And it really has to do with IT integration. I mean, if anybody has gone through any kind of, software deployment in a hospital these days, they know that the survey questionnaires are growing, and not only questions, but pages, et cetera. And I think a lot of supply chain folks get a little leery of it because they know how long that process can drag out. And then in this case, there's really no IT integration. So I'm assuming that JUDI is up and running in no time at all, as you talked about.
Yeah, we even sound the phones. It's on an iPhone. And so when you sign up and have a subscription with us, we send you the phone with the app on it. Like you said, there's no IT integration. There's no HIPAA compliance because we're not capturing any patient data. We aren't connecting into the ERP. So much of what we do is help solve all of these problems that haven't been solved with their master, or with their like Lawson or Epic or, any of these different IT solutions that are commonly used in supply chain today. Because they're so integrated, they can't solve some of these individual problems. Like, how do we manage consignment inventory if it's not owned? How do we manage overstock inventory? How do we have visibility into every expiration date or lot number into every product on the shelf? That's where we come alongside and say, we don't want you to replace that. We're never going to replace that. But we want to be able to help you in these tasks that your team is doing today completely manual. Let me give you another example here. We were at a site last week, and they have mesh and heart valves, and they're really high dollar inventory sitting in a room. And they had the guy that manages that room had everything on a rack. And I said, how long will it take you to intake this? Because he has to type out reference number, description, serial number, date of manufacture, all of that stuff. He's like, it'll take him about 2.5 hours. So Susan, who's on our team, was with me, and she's like, I can get this done in 10 minutes. And he's like, no way. I sat there and chatted with him. The whole cart was completely scanned in 7 minutes with a Excel export. So he had the data that he needed. And now we instantly recovered 2 hours of his day to go do something that's way more important than typing out information on boxes.
That's incredible. That's serious time savings. And again, we talked about the environment that we're in right now. We need to have new and creative ways to reduce man hours. We just have to. It's the only way we're going to survive. And I think that, integrated solution, an open API, connecting different platforms is really critical too. And I love the partnerships that you've established to help drive that forward, to even make JUDI an even more powerful tool. Now at SxanPro, I know JUDI's not the only app. That's the one we're talking about today. But for me personally, we were at a conference recently, and I got to sit in on a number of conversations that you were having with existing customers who are actually working with your new product in the beta testing phase. And so I don't know if you want to maybe put a teaser out there for everybody on that.
What I will share is the biggest feedback we've been given this year is we love the UDI data, but we need help in linking it to our master data management file. And we'd really like to be able to have predictive analytics with pricing analysis while we're doing the inventory. So we are enhancing our product line to be able to achieve those as 2 main goals so that we really can focus on helping hospitals integrate UDI into their master data file. The reason that's so important to me is not just for the expiration date data, but Justin, you know this, but I sit on some UDI committees. I advocate a lot with ARM. I'm passionate about why UDI is so important, even outside of SxanPro. If hospitals have UDI connected to their master files, the technology that's coming, that's being developed by other companies like recalls, they'll be able to see that instantly because now we have it's just like UPC codes. It's just like food, right? So now we know exactly where that item is sitting when I get a recall from the manufacturer because reference numbers are identified in so many different ways. The manufacturer might give us that reference number, but we leave off or the hospital leaves off the zeros or the ones or whatever it is. So that's going to be a big piece. There's so much work going into right now on disease cycles and what products were being used on patients and total patient care. And every hospital calls widgets different names based on how it's built into their master data file. When we can get most hospitals calling all things the same things, we'll get really, really good at being able to do these predictive analytics. And that's the future of healthcare. But we have to start somewhere. And my theory on it has been, as I've talked to hospitals, is we have to at least make it real easy to start getting the UDI associated with that MDM. And that's what this product's going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't know what's possible with the data you don't have yet. You know it's there, but you don't have it. So, you have to be able to get that information. And again, from the very beginning, we talked about transforming healthcare. All right, Ashlea, one of the things that I know about you is you're a phenomenal networker. You really try to not only bring value to every conversation, but you really try to connect people. And so as we were talking about our conversation today, one of the things you mentioned to me was that you're looking to add to your advisory board and you're always working with thought leaders, not only to develop your solution, but to point them in the right direction for other solutions as well. It's something that I really admire about you. Can you talk about the advisory board and what you're trying to accomplish with that and maybe how people can get involved?
Absolutely. So in the new year, one of our initiatives is to formalize more of these conversations that we're having across the country. We have developed the SxanPro technologies to solve problems for our hospitals, but those problems they're new problems every day. And so we want to make sure that we're still being thought leaders in this space. And in order to do that, we need feedback. And it can even be to the point of, hey, they get to see the technology that we've talked about today before it comes out and make sure we're hitting the mark, making sure that it's not a product we're trying to sell. We want it to solve a problem. That was the number one reason that we built it. So you're going to see, or if you're following the SxanPro page, which I hope everybody will, we're going to be asking people to sign up for this and be part of our feedback sessions. So it's an opportunity for the supply chain leaders to say, this is a headache for us. Is there anything you can do to help? And give us some direction in how we're developing out our future products.
Yeah, that's great. So would they contact you directly to get involved, or do they reach out on LinkedIn, when they're looking at these posts?
Absolutely. Yeah. Connect with me on LinkedIn. We have a solid team that I'll be connecting everyone with, but I love LinkedIn connections. So feel free to shoot me a message.
Yeah, SxanPro is definitely one of the companies I see leveraging social media as well as anybody in the healthcare space. So keep up the great work there. And I do want to point everybody to your webpage, SxanPro.com. That's spelled SxanPro.com. And you can email Ashlea, ASHLEA at SxanPro.com. Ashlea, I always enjoy our conversations a lot, and we haven't really had a chance to talk about what it is that SxanPro does before, and I'm glad we took this opportunity to do that today because I just see an enormous amount of cost savings here, from operational efficiencies to better management of expired inventory and even just worker satisfaction and retention, because there is a great deal of time that gets spent on remedial work, manual effort, and we absolutely can and should remove that from the equation so that we can transform healthcare. So, Ashlea, I love having you on the show. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap?
Thank you. Thanks for all of your efforts too. And, connecting a lot of us thought leaders in the space that are trying to create products that are solving problems, helping hospitals rethink the way that they're managing or handling some of these supply chain headaches. So I appreciate all the work that you and the team are doing, and thanks for having me.
That was Ashlea Souffrou, founder and CEO of SxanPro. And this whole conversation was talking about the importance of gaining visibility to an accurate inventory, especially in the climate that we're in today with supply chain working remotely, in many cases even out of state, and also being able to get that inventory quickly. And I love the story that she told about being able to help one of her customers have an immediate response to a survey where it came back and they had expired product, and they were able to address that with data in 4 days. I think that's really an incredible story, and it highlights the operational efficiencies that are existing here with utilizing the JUDI app to be able to get insight into that inventory. And then what can we do with that information? And she gave us a little teaser on what's coming down the line. And I do want to just encourage folks out there, if you're excited by this technology as much as I am, you should be getting involved with Ashlea and maybe joining their advisory board. So you can participate by emailing Ashlea. That's ASHLEA at SxanPro.com. SxanPro is SxanPro.com. That's going to do it for this vendor spotlight, but we would love it if you downloaded our smartphone app for iPhone or Android. It's simply the best way to listen to the Power Supply podcast. But if you're already listening to podcasts on Apple, Amazon, or Google Podcasts, you can find us there, as well as on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify. And honestly, there's so many different podcast apps out there. Just search for the Power Supply podcast. We love feedback as well. And so I would just ask that you send an email to info@powersupplymedia.net if you have feedback on one of the episodes. Maybe you heard something that really made a difference in your day-to-day work in the healthcare supply chain. Maybe you've got a guest or a topic that you'd like to hear on a future episode. Again, just shoot that email over to info@powersupplymedia.net. Thank you for listening to this Vendor Spotlight on Power Supply.